Hello, my name is Beverly Sorensen from Women's and Children's Horizons. Thank you for joining us and continuing to bring awareness to domestic violence. This week, our webinar is entitled Domestic Violence Does Not Discriminate. This is one of the reasons we are addressing underserved populations. Populations is a term that means populations that face barriers in accessing and using victim services, and includes populations that are underserved because of geographical reasons. Maybe they live in the county, and because of nationality, race, immigration and citizenship status, ageism, sexual orientation and identity, people with disabilities, and people with limited English proficiency. At Women's and Children's Horizons, we realize that in providing our services to the community, that a one-size-fits-all approach may present additional barriers to people already marginalized in society. In addition to education, and through various ways, our staff represents a wide range of people with various racial, social, economics, and cultural backgrounds that help people experience and acknowledge that aids us in understanding and fulfilling the type of services and needs for this community. The staff will talk about how Women's and Children's Horizons respects diverse populations by honoring their values and cultures. I will be addressing domestic violence in later life. Cynthia will address women's and children's services for children and the possible effects of violence on children. Ashley will be talking about LGBTQ services. Sharon will talk about our Hispanic services, and Gwen will address how we help African Americans by understanding their cultures. And Patty will discuss how we address and meet the needs of people with disabilities. Hi, this is Beverly again. Domestic violence in later life. Why is abuse in later life characterized as an unserved population? Ageism is certainly a factor. Advocates use a tool called the power and control wheel. It explains the tactics that are used on victims. There are several wheels, but the one we're going to talk about mostly is domestic abuse in later life wheel. First, I just want to show you the first power and control wheel. In it, in the center says power and control. That is the goal of perpetrators. That's what they want. And in the spokes of the wheel, they use those methods to get that power and control.
Hello, my name is Cynthia, and I'm here to talk about the children's program. I'm the children's program coordinator here at Women's and Children's Horizons. The program provides services to the families involving the residential and outreach services to the community. The goal of the children's program is to address specific needs to the family associated with domestic abuse, such as fear, feeling of helplessness, guilt, and anger. Families involved in the children's program services are offered a diversity, family bonding, and increasing activities during their stay at the domestic abuse shelter. We're here to comfort the children. The Children's Witness Group is designed to provide the children an opportunity to learn how to cope with the effects of witnessing domestic abuse, how to express their feelings, how to interact with society in general, parenting group is offered to parents in shelter. This group is designed to improve and recover parenting skills. The primary goal for Safe Exchange is to reduce parental conflict. This provides parents and children the opportunity to spend time together without the danger or emotional distress of conflict between parents during placement exchange. The Safe Exchange program is offered to the community. Due to the pandemic, our service has changed, but we still offer the services. The services are provided to the children of domestic abuse shelter and are available to all ages, since there are no restrictions on the children who receive services. Safety issue brings clients from other cities and other counties and another states. The parenting education class and Safe Exchange are offered to any community member wishing to receive services and increase their knowledge on nonviolent parenting practice. Community members are self-referred, agency referred, and of any of our services, and there's no eligibility requirement for these services. Children who witness domestic abuse are affected in different ways. The effects most often seen in children are low self-esteem, depression, anger, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. In addition, children are high risk for exhibiting violent behavior themselves. Kenosha County residents are impacted by domestic abuse regardless of demographic and socioeconomic status. Victim and witness are not the only persons affected by domestic abuse. Family members and friends, employees, neighbors are affected as well. Anyone who are in contact with victims of domestic abuse become a secondary victim. The Children's Witness Group are indeed focused on the problems that children are facing in their home. The children's staff is trained to understand the effects of domestic abuse on children and how to respond in a situation where adults become violent. The children in our community that are victims and witness of domestic abuse are often scared and worry about silence, shame, and conflicting loyalties. The goal of the children's program is to improve and provide a safe and fun environment to allow children to become more confident and more aware of their situation. Children frequently are afraid of disclosure of their situation. During a group, we affirm that they can become more stress-free about their situations. We help develop safety plans when children who receive our services. The safety plans help them to be safe in their environment. The many effects of abuse are addressed with support, education, training through our many sides of our program. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitness to the violence. There's a Michigan study of low-income preschoolers who found that children who had been exposed to family violence suffer symptoms of post-traumatic disorder, as I mentioned before, such as bedwetting, nightmares, and are at great risk than their peers having allergies, asthma, gastrointestinal problems, headaches, and flu. Another statistics are children and mothers who are exposed to prenatal physical domestic violence are at increased risk of exhibiting aggressive, anxious, depressed, or hyperactivity behavior. Females who are exposed to their parents' domestic violence as a teenagers are significantly more likely to become victims of dating violence. Children who experience childhood trauma, including witnessed incidents of domestic abuse, are at greater risk of having serious adult health problems, including tobacco use, substance abuse, obesity, cancer, heart disease, depression, and high risk of unplanned pregnancy. Physical abuse during childhood increases the risk of future victimization among women and the risk of future perpetration of abuse by men more than twice. So what our children's need? Children's need a safe and secure environment. Children's need the violence to stop. Children need to know that there's adults who will listen, believe them, and shelter them. Children need a sense of routine. Children need support services to meet their needs. Children need to learn domestic violence is wrong and learn non-violent techniques of resolving conflict. Children need adults to speak out and break the silence. We need to break the silence. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ashley, and I'm here today to talk about the LGBTQ advocate at Women and Children's Horizons. At WCH, we want to ensure that everyone feels safe and comfortable being their authentic selves when they seek services. Our LGBTQ advocate is an intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking advocate who identifies with the LGBTQ community and specializes in the tactics of abuse used in LGBTQ relationships. We know that abuse comes in many forms, and for LGBTQ relationships, this can show up through power, manipulation, exploitation, oppression, and barriers to service. We know that abuse doesn't segregate. It doesn't care about your educational background, immigration status, your race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, country of origin, ableness, socioeconomic status, or any other identity in your life. Abuse can happen to anyone, and for everyone. Sometimes the identities we have can be used against us to create a barrier to service. So let's take a look at some of the tactics of abuse in LGBTQ relationships. LGBTQ IPV is different from heterosexual cisgender IPV because it can incorporate some of the following. A lack of community acknowledgement. The LGBTQ community often does not recognize that abuse happens in their relationships. And because the community is small, leaving can mean leaving part or all of your community. Internalized phobias create or increase self-blame for the survivor. Identity can be used against survivors as a blame tactic for why the abuse occurred. A general lack of visibility of healthy role models and healthy relationships makes it hard for LGBTQ people to know what a healthy LGBTQ relationship looks like. Lack of validation of the relationship by friends, family, and the community can mean that the abuse isn't recognized as IPV. And for those who are closeted, a lack of support system can make it harder to leave and even harder to find someone to talk to. With a small community fighting for their rights, people often resist talking about the bad parts of relationships because there is a pressure within the community to not air dirty laundry or things that would make LGBTQ relationships look bad because so many people are fighting for their rights. There are added tactics of abuse for each different form of abuse in an LGBTQ relationship. WCH is here to help people through this. Our advocates are a support system, and we are here for you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sharon and I'm the Hispanic Advocate at Women and Children's Horizons. And I am here to talk to you today and highlight specific issues and distinguishing dynamics that confront the Latinx Hispanic community, and also how WCH helps serve this specific population. So, I would like to start off by just quickly mentioning some facts, some statistics. I love statistics because I think it really helps put some things into perspective a little bit. So, there was a study in Massachusetts conducted over a 14-year period. And this study found that Hispanic women were at disproportionately higher risk of being killed by a partner than non-Hispanic women. Also, 50% of Latinas who experience violence don't report it. Fewer than 3 in 10 Latinas have heard of intimate partner violence protective orders. The Latinx and Hispanic community are the largest and fastest growing population in the U.S. And one of the first steps to preventing violence is to understand it. So it is important to understand the barriers that this growing population faces. So I'm not gonna talk about all the barriers because that would just take way too long. So I will briefly mention the main ones, which are language, immigration status, and cultural differences. The first one is language, as I mentioned, and this is one of the biggest barriers for Hispanic victims of violence, because most of the literature and services are intended for the English-speaking population. The inability to read or speak English fluently means that many Latinx Hispanic women, particularly immigrant women, and they may not know that domestic violence is even a crime, or that social services for victims exist. The second one is immigration status. Many women who migrate from their native countries do so because of their dependency on their spouse for financial support, legal status, or both. And so immigrant status makes immigrant women particularly vulnerable to domestic violence. And this is because immigrant women refrain from reporting domestic violence for fear that their undocumented spouse, whom they are dependent on, will be deported. So this creates a whole rationale for remaining in that abusive relationship. Women who are fearful of their own deportation are also very reluctant to report domestic violence. So it's safe to say that that immigration status acts as this control mechanism to ensure that they don't leave that relationship. And especially now, in light of recent immigration enforcement policies, there has been this apprehension. Victims are very apprehensive of coming forth and reporting domestic violence. And there's also this mistrust within the police, and because again, they fear that they will be deported. And this has become, the unfortunate reality for many victims. Cultural differences. Now, there are two terms that I will briefly talk about that relate to the cultural differences. The first one is familismo. And familismo refers to the central place that the family has in the lives of Hispanic and Latinx families. There is a strong family roles point to the father as a primary breadwinner, and to the mother as a person responsible for the well-being and cohesiveness of the family. Although this is changing a little bit due to the current economic realities. There's also the term machismo, which refers to the excessive masculinity, and most machistas believe in conservative gender role ideas. So, for example, opposing a woman's right to work, or participating in sports, or pursuing other traditionally male roles in society. But for many Latinas, and their role as mothers is still the most important aspect of their lives, a responsibility against which most of their decisions and actions are weighed. I see this all the time where Latina survivors prioritize their children over themselves. They protect them and provide for them as best they could. And this identity is further supported by the influence of Catholicism, which dictates that women are supposed to be devout and traditional in their beliefs. And of course, they're going to view domestic violence, domestic abuse as a private family matter. There are women who arrive in the United States from countries with cultures that essentially tolerate domestic violence, and these justice systems don't effectively criminalize domestic violence and domestic abuse. And so when they come to the U.S., they think that domestic violence is they don't think domestic violence is unlawful and wrong. With this lack of knowledge, they may never be aware that there are services and organizations out there that help them. And in fact, only less than 30% of Latinx Hispanic survivors are aware of domestic violence services and options. And so here at WCH, we really try to tailor to and accommodate our services to meet the needs of the Latinx Hispanic community. And we provide domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking advocacy services. And in my particular role, I assist victims regarding information on immigration, court accompaniment, and the court process, including family court, divorce, legal separations, child custody, all that good stuff. I also help Spanish-speaking victims fill out restraining orders and family court forms, and I also help fill out referrals to other community resources, such as family law attorneys, immigration attorneys, and oftentimes they want counseling or therapy. So we help with those referrals as well. And these services are all crucial because, as I mentioned before, Latinx Hispanic victims are very vulnerable. And as my amazing coworker Christina mentioned last week, we are here for them to navigate the often complex and intimidating court process. And I mean, it is already intimidating and confusing as it is, but for many of the Latinx Hispanic community, this process takes a whole nother level because of all the barriers I mentioned. So I'm going to stop talking right now. I can go on and on about this topic, but feel free to reach out to me for any questions. I am here for you. WCH is here for you. Our phone number is 262-656-3500. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gwen, sexual assault advocate at Women and Children's Horizons. As a woman and advocate of color, I'm sometimes met with some unique challenges. Similarly, our clients of color experience some of these same challenges and more. When survivors of color are accessing services, it is important to keep in mind the role that culture and the belief systems have and how they guide the survivors in where, when, how, or even if they seek services. In the African American community, for example, because of mistrust in the systems, a lot of families will not report abuse. They don't trust the system, so they don't report. They have a rule that says, or if you want to call it a rule, that says what happens in this house stays in this house. And that's pretty much how it remains for years. There are high numbers in African American males and females that do not report their abusers. Black women are more likely to be murdered in domestic violence or intimate partner violence relationships. Although we know that domestic violence occurs across all races, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic classes, but for women of color, high rates of poverty and limited job resources add to those barriers. And it adds to them having more difficulties finding help and services as well. The advocates of women and children's rights take our responsibility to be culturally responsible seriously. Advocates check the lens that we use when delivering direct client services. We do that by using the 3-step model, which entails the tone that we're using. Do we offer the benefit of the doubt to all of our clients? Are we talking to them or at them? Are we offering consistent resources such as grocery, gas cards, nifty vouchers, etc.? And lastly, are we taking the same course of action to assist all clients, regardless of their color, race, religion, or ethnic backgrounds? Thank you for listening, and feel free to contact any of our amazing staff by calling 262-656-3500 or the hotline at 262-652-9900. Thank you.
Disability Rights, Wisconsin. Our vision: all persons with disabilities and their families shall be empowered to exercise and enjoy the full extent of their rights and to pursue the greatest possible quality of life. Abuse definitions. Forms of abuse in the disability or disabled community are basically the same as any person being abused physically, mentally, emotionally, or financially. First of all, the physical abuse is a non-accidental use of force that results in bodily injury, pain, or impairment, includes but not limited to being slapped, burned, cut, bruised, or improperly physically strained. Sexual abuse is a non-consensual sexual contact of any kind, includes but not limited to forcing sexual contact with self or forcing self-contact with a third person. Emotional abuse, willful infliction of mental or emotional anguish by threat, humiliation, intimidation, or other abusive conduct, includes but not limited to isolating or frightening an adult. Neglect, failure by caregiver to fulfill caregiving responsibilities, includes but not limited to abandonment, deprivation of food, water, heat, cleanliness, eyeglasses, dentures, or health-related services. There's also self-neglect, the adult's inability due to physical or mental impairments to perform tasks essential for caring for oneself. Financial exploitation, improper use of an adult's funds, property, or resources, includes but not limited to fraud, embezzlement, forgery, falsifying records, coerced property transfers, or denial of access to assets. This is the fastest growing crime in the county. Estimates are that only 1 in every 25 suspected cases are ever reported. Abuse in women with disabilities. Prevalence of abuse among women with disabilities. 62% of a national sample of women with physical disabilities reported having experienced emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. The same percentage of a comparison group of women without disabilities reported abuse, but the women with disabilities had experienced abuse for longer periods of time. The most common perpetrators of abuse were husbands and parents for both women and with and without disabilities. Women with disabilities, however, were significantly more likely to experience emotional and sexual abuse by attendants and healthcare workers. In addition to the types of abuse experienced by all women, women with physical disabilities are sometimes abused by withholding needed orthotic equipment such as wheelchairs or braces, medications, transportation, or essential assistance with personal tasks such as dressing or getting out of bed. Others have reported a history of sexual abuse among 25% of adolescent girls with mental retardation, 31% of those with congenital physical disabilities, 36% of multi-handicapped children admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and 50% of women blind from birth. Interventions for abused women with disability. There have been no studies that examine the existence, feasibility, or effectiveness of abuse interventions for women with disabilities. Women with disabilities face serious barriers to accessing existing programs to help women remove violence from their lives. In both the disability rights movement and the battered women's movement, it is generally acknowledged that programs to assist abused women are often architecturally inaccessible, lack interpreter services for deaf women, and are unable to assist women who need assistance with daily self-care or medications. Recommendations for research and program development. Provide or refer to legal assistance for obtaining restraining orders and managing court systems, which is accessible to women with disabilities. Keep statistics on the number of women with disabilities who call crisis hotlines. Use other program services. Assist and encourage police in recording disability status in their crime reports, as well as encouraging adoption of a separate category for perpetrators who are caregivers. Offer training to disability-related service providers, including independent living centers and churches, on recognizing the symptoms of abuse and the characteristics of potential batterers. They should be familiar with and able to refer to resources for battered women in their community. Train staff on how to communicate with persons who have hearing, cognitive, speech, or psychiatric impairments. They should understand environmental barriers faced by women with physical and sensory disabilities when offering advice or referrals for obtaining shelter. Have on hand an extensive network of community referrals and contact numbers, including volunteers or other community resources for obtaining personal assistance, which I will show you at the end of this segment, resources that we have. Kenosha County, the Aging and Disability Resource Center. The ADRC is a free one-stop shop for older people, people with disabilities, and their families They provide objective, reliable information and guidance on a wide variety of topics. The ADRC is very, very informational for our senior citizens and women, children, men with disabilities. They have a plethora of information. Very, very helpful. To report abuse of any elderly and or disabled adult, there is a call number on the slide that you see above. 1 out of every 9 Americans over the age of 60 may be suffering from some sort of abuse. Wisconsin averages about 3,000 reports of suspected elder abuse cases each year. There's a lot of risk factors and factors which increase in likelihood that someone will be the victim of elder abuse. The slide that's presented to you has more dot points, bullet points that you can look at and read at your leisure. Very informative information. To touch upon briefly the deaf community resources, I have a slide here that shows resources for the deaf and hard of hearing. Here, Wisconsin is another organization that can help with people that have hearing or deaf experiences. There's the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing here in Wisconsin. Telecommunications equipment purchase programs, the TEPP program, helps people get these devices in their homes so that they can communicate while being subject to the deaf community. There's Wisconsin Relay Systems, also a telecommunications system that helps people get these devices in their homes to help them communicate effectively to their loved ones. The last slide, as I mentioned, is our disability rights resources. I have several resources there. I hope you will click on them and take a look at them. My presentation was short and quick, and I hope you can click on these websites. Inside of these websites, we'll have tons of information for where to go for help, Meals on Wheels, anything that you might need help with, assisted living programs, help in your home, help with any devices or equipment that you might need at your home. Very informational and very helpful. So I hope you look at that and take advantage of those resources. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Patty, and I hope you stay tuned for our next program next week, which is Wednesday, October 28th, for week 4 of our Women and Children's Horizons Domestic Violence Month. Thank you. Have a great day.